Howdy, Ags. Welcome to Aggie Growth Hacks. The podcast is dedicated to helping entrepreneurs improve their business, connect with other Aggie entrepreneurs, and support one another. I'm your host, Greg Martin, Fighting Texas Aggie class of 2001.
And I'm your co-host, Chris Hunter, Fighting Texas Aggie class of 1998. Whoop!
Well, we got a little story for you, Ags. Keith Alaniz, Fighting Texas Aggie class of 2004, joined us way back in season 3 to kick off our season. His company, Rumi Spice, is one of the largest spice importers in Afghanistan, impacting the lives of over 100,000 Afghanis. We wanted to bring Keith back so that he can share with you his journey over the last couple of years and to talk about how he hacked the growth of Rumi Spice in a challenging environment, to say the least.
So pass it back and listen up to Keith as he shares some really good bull.
Well, welcome back, Ranger Alaniz. It is so awesome to have you join us again. Ags, if y'all have not listened to the original interview that we had with Keith way back a couple seasons ago, definitely check it out. His company, Rumi Spice, I'm going to ask him to maybe share a little bit of the inception story again to catch everybody up. But we specifically wanted to bring him back and to talk about his entrepreneurial journey over the last couple of years and kind of where Rumi Spice has gone and where it's grown and then where it's going to in the next couple of years. So Keith, thank you so much for joining us again on Aggie Growth Hacks.
Thanks, Greg. It's excited to be back. Thanks for inviting me.
Awesome. Well, we're glad you're here. So how about you take us back to the very beginning, to the mountaintop in Afghanistan, where you and a bunch of your crazy peers literally were at war, looked out and decided, hell, I can make a business. So how did that go?
Yeah, I never anticipated that at this point in my life, I'd be a spice purveyor, getting spices from across the world and selling here in the U.S. We've been going it was 2014 when we when we started this journey. And at that time I had spent, about 4 years focused on Afghanistan. And I was serving with the military in a program called the Afghan Hands Program, where they had trained us in a cohort of officers and senior enlisted from across services to be regional experts in Afghanistan. They gave us some language training, gave us cultural training, and gave us some specialized training in counterinsurgency. Our mission was to go and work with various organizations and serve as a network within the network, but also provide that long-term perspective on the ground to our commanders, who were oftentimes only there for 6 to 12 months, as you know. But we were committed to focus on Afghanistan for 4 years. So we did multiple tours over 4 years. And I had begun to realize, and as anybody who probably spends a little bit of time in, contingency environments like Afghanistan, like many places in the world, the root causes of instability are economically driven. And it's this lack of economic opportunity that provides the opportunity for insurgents to come in, an opportunity for a populace to be just unhappy with their situation. And when you're living on the edge of poverty, the life or death decisions become a little bit, easier to make, right? And for a lot of reasons, I was seeing that this is what the root causes of instability is this economic disparity. And at that point, 15 years of international intervention had really focused on the urban centers and not really, there wasn't much benefit given to the rural population, which comprises 85% of the people who live in Afghanistan. So, a farmer came up to me and he was telling me his story that I'd grow more saffron if I had a demand or market for my product. And he was just thinking like locally, domestic market, and asking for help to do that. And
you're like, nope, we can do the whole world.
Yeah, that's when the light bulb clicked for me. I got on a Skype call with my friends who I'd served with in the Army, Kim and Emily. I'd served with them in the Army, and they were both at Harvard Business School at the time. They happened to be in an entrepreneur class, and I was like, well, this is an opportunity. Let's see if we can connect this farmer with some restaurants in the U.S. and provide a demand. And if we can do that, he'll grow more saffron. If he grows more saffron, he creates more jobs, and maybe we can start this virtuous cycle of, economic empowerment through this business. And we were really thinking small, but it really, gained traction quite quickly. We were on NPR, within 6 months of really like taking our first product to the U.S. and starting to talk about this at various like conferences and stuff. We landed a spot on NPR, had no website, had no products. I went to the Container Store, had my family around a Christmas table, like packing these saffron units, and we shipped out like $20,000 worth of product in the first holiday season, and it was fantastic. But anyway, it's snowballed from there, and today we're the largest importer of Afghanistan products. We're sold all over the U.S. in Whole Foods and like 5,000 other stores across the country, and it's
wow.
The most important thing for me is that our mission, we're not really a spice company. Our purpose is really to provide sustainable livelihoods for people in Afghanistan. And I'm really proud to say that today we're supporting over 10,000 livelihoods in Afghanistan through our purchases, and really through the purchases of our consumers. And it's, not a handout, it's trading value for value. And through those purchases, we're, helping to make a difference in across the world.
That's so awesome. So let me ask, all right, so the last time that we talked, you had taken more of a board of director role, right? Is that still true? Has that changed? And why?
Yeah, so it's a really interesting story, Chris, because I had stepped away from the day-to-day operations. We had sold some interest to some investors, and the entrepreneur journey, of course, it ebbs and flows, right? So I at that time, the last time we talked, not really involved in the day-to-day. Well, in the couple of years since we talked last, the Taliban government, the Afghan government fell to the Taliban, which, and I can talk about this a little bit more, but paradoxically, like our commercial operations in Afghanistan are operating as good as ever. We had no effect. The fall of the government had no effect on what we're doing in Afghanistan. But what it did affect is our one of our investors. They had to exit their investment just because of the nature of their fund, which presented an opportunity to purchase their position. And so I got with a partner and purchased their shares back and basically acquired the company that I had started. And, with that, I moved into the lead role as CEO and I'm back in the day-to-day. And I've been doing that for the last 6 months. But, with everything going on in Afghanistan, with the macroeconomic environment, we really needed to pivot from a company that was just trying to scale at all costs to a company that's sustainably profitable. It's something that we owe to our investors, but more importantly, it's what we owe to our partners in Afghanistan, because this isn't a charity, right? We're not giving them handouts. We also don't want to get handouts. We want to be profitable and sustainable in our own right, because that's what's going to drive, long-term progress for our partners in Afghanistan.
All right, Keith, there's about 18 things that I want to unpack there, but let's start back with, so you started the journey, you formed this company, you were in the company, you realized that it needed to grow, and any entrepreneur out there knows that growth has a cost. A lot of times that is actual monetary financial cost. If you're going to buy more saffron, import more saffron, then you've got to have cash to be able to pay for that. So you and your co-founders decided to go about the route of actually selling equity. You sold to a couple private equity firms are contingent of that. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay. So you went through the whole pitch process. Obviously, we talked about last time, with the process of being on Shark Tank and the nuances of that, Hollywood style pitch. But then you actually went through that process, consummated a funding, a round, sold some of your equity. You were diluted. So you had less ownership and also for the good of the company, realizing brought a professional in, ran the company, and then you stepped back in. So that process where you were buying your company back, how was that different from selling your equity to buying the equity? I mean, because that's the same side or different sides of the same coin. Can you talk about that a little bit? Your experience with that?
Yeah, Greg, I've been really interested in this, entrepreneurship through acquisition model. And I've been looking into this model for a long time. And for those who aren't familiar with the model, it's very similar to any kind of M&A, but private equity firms are going to work on the medium to large business side. And there's this whole gap in the market with small to medium businesses. To answer your question, my approach was really from someone who would acquire a company. I was intimately familiar with the financials and the operations of the company. So there was a lot of advantages there. It was nothing new that I didn't understand. But, I did take the approach. I tried to take the emotion out of it, right? Like, look at the operations, look at the financials, and think about what can you do to change things, to add value, and essentially get a good deal out of it. Because, this is real life, real money. It's not. You have to be pretty confident going in that you can get a good value out of it. And obviously, the social impact is very important to me, and my sort of purpose in life, I feel, is driving impact in these kind of ways. But at the end of the day, I need to make sure that this deal works, and because I have to get partners to come in to this deal, I have to be able to raise money. So I really tried to take the emotion off, tried to take the ownership off, and then think about the deal from an investor, as an investor would. would think about it, and like what kind of things can we do to change the business model to start generating cash.
So can you share any of your big objectives that really did bring value to you?
Sure. You know, the CEO that we had hired had done a great job of building the company and start getting the right pieces in place. But, you know, we started to see that things had grown where the costs were just unsustainable, you know, operational expense, given where we are in our ability to raise money. So there was an opportunity to just cut our OpEx and reduce that significantly. So my way of looking at it was, okay, what can we cut on OpEx that won't affect any kind of revenue generating activities? And how can we, you know, what are we going to give up by doing that? And then even on the revenue generating activity side, like what things are we doing that doesn't have the contribution margin where we probably shouldn't be doing it? So it was a process of, for example, I mean, to be transparent, I can share that like e-commerce, and I think people who have been running e-commerce companies lately realize that like the dynamics have changed in e-commerce. It's very sensitive to shipping costs. Digital advertising costs have gone up. So e-commerce for our business started, you know, showing very little contribution margin. In fact, it probably was negative if you put in the overhead and do a fully, you know, cost loaded model. So that was sort of an easy decision. Like, let's just pull back everything on e-commerce. We're not going to spend any on digital marketing.
So you completely exited that aspect of the business.
But we still sell on e-commerce, but we're not spending any money on marketing. In fact, in the first quarter of this year, we cut our advertising spend by 90%. So I mean, our advertising and marketing spend. So everything we do for marketing, we cut it by 90%. And so we've had a reduction in revenues on that channel, but an increase in profitability. So, you know, that's at the end of the day, that's the name of the game, is profitability. You know, similarly, we were able to cut a lot of resources that were like redundant or not as efficient. And, you know, because I knew how to do a lot of stuff, like there's a lot that I could put on my plate. And we're also really leaning forward into leveraging technology. It's a really exciting time. And, you know, and everybody's hearing about ChatGPT and all this kind of like AI tools. That stuff's been around for a while, but it's very, very much maturing now. So I think there's a real opportunity to fully leverage technology to help drive efficiency in the business. So we have done that. And over the last quarter, we've cut our operational expense by 45%. And then we've seen our revenues increase by 45%. So I think if you'd asked me in December, like when this plan was in action, if we would have been so successful, I would have probably said like, oh, I don't know, it might take us a year. But it took us like 3 months to get to profitability. And, you know,
congratulations. Good for you.
It gives me a lot of confidence to like trust my ability to look at the numbers and see that it makes sense. But, you know, also like our team in Afghanistan, our team here has just been doing a tremendous amount of work and doing more with less and being able to execute our mission.
So as a marketer, I have to ask this, right? You cut your marketing budget by 90%, right? So where are the sales coming from then?
So we operate in four different channels: retail, wholesale, food service, which are restaurants, and then our direct to consumer. Of course, the marketing supports all of those, but a lot of that was geared towards, you know, this low contribution margin channel, which is e-commerce. So we really just focused the spend that we are doing more on the retail side, which we have a pretty good contribution margin. Wholesale doesn't require a lot of marketing spend at this point, and actually we're just very focused on retail, and that's where the bulk of our revenue has been coming from in the first couple of months.
Interesting. Now, let me ask also, just kind of as a follow-up on this, where does the social impact, you know, actually get impacted by these decisions?
Yeah, great question, Chris. So one of the big changes we made is we really pivoted our marketing strategy to emphasize our points of differentiation and our value proposition. There's a lot of companies getting spices. There's fewer companies getting directly sourced high quality spices. And there's very few companies getting directly sourced high quality spices with a laser focus on social impact. And so we really wanted to highlight what we're doing in Afghanistan and the impact that we have on people's lives and make that the North Star of what we do. And so we're trying to resonate that in our marketing. And I think in that way as well, we even though we've cut our sort of digital advertising spend and our marketing spend, we've been able to, you know, continue to grow our brand with that refocus on the mission.
As you've gone through that process, did your company quantify your values or the things that really drive Rumi Spice?
Yes, it's interesting when you have like a period of sort of a tough journey with like a turnaround. It kind of forces you to really focus on what's important and what does your company stand for. So that was healthy in a way to allow us to like recalibrate on our mission to provide sustainable livelihoods in Afghanistan. And then, when you do that, everything else starts coming to light, the marketing strategy, how to pivot that marketing strategy towards focusing on what your North Star is. And then, of course, we look at our consumers and we go out and do some of the tactical stuff, like go out and do consumer surveys, see what resonates with them. Why do they use Rumi Spice? What do they like about us? What do they want to see more about us? Where do they get their information from? Are they going on YouTube? Are they going on Instagram? Like, we don't do TikTok. That's really popular now, but our consumers don't use TikTok. So that's the people using TikTok aren't buying and cooking spices at home. So yeah, so I think it was really helpful to sort of take those steps to recalibrate what we stand for, and then trickle that down through sort of the consumer research and design thinking, and like kind of think about like how do we resonate and highlight that value proposition for our consumers.
Can you share with us your values?
Yeah. Well, the North Star, right? Providing sustainable livelihoods in Afghanistan. And, we stand for high quality spices, but we want to do that by driving social impact, and I think we're a small team, right? So we're cultivating this culture garden, as I like to say now, with this small group of individuals. But one thing we want people to do is feel connected and proud with the mission that they're on, and the journey that they're on. So one thing that we've done is, even like the contractors and service providers that are working with us, we bring them in as partners because we want them to feel proud about the work that they're doing too. And even if you're not on marketing or consumer facing, like you still should be proud about what you're doing and the impact that you're having in Afghanistan. But yeah, I mean, it's really about impact. It's about high quality, and it's about transparency and ethical sourcing, and that's really the key that we want it to resonate through our organization.
So let me ask on those: have those been there from the start, or did y'all fine tune those as you went along your journey?
I feel that this was why I started this business with my partners in 2014. It wasn't to sell saffron. It wasn't to sell spices. It wasn't to like sell to the best restaurants in the world. It was to cultivate peace in Afghanistan by catalyzing economic development, by providing a market for Afghanistan products. And so when we think back about like why we started and centered ourselves there, it just became clear that we needed to just refocus on the original intent of the company. And not to say that ever went away, it just lost its sort of focus, and like it started not being the North Star anymore. And I think that when we lose that, we just get lost in all the other companies that are doing directly sourced spices or, ethical sourcing. I mean, and that's easy to do. I mean, not easy, but there's a lot of people doing that now, but not to the extent that we are with a real focus on the impact that we're having on the ground.
Keith, that is so powerful that North Star, quite frankly, led a significant turnaround in Rumi Spice, probably during what I would say is the most challenging business environment out of any business that we've ever had on Aggie Growth Hacks. No one else operates in a foreign environment that has had war for the last 50 years. And one of the things that you said way back when we had our first interview is we asked you about the political risk associated with it. And it's something to the extent of, hey, if the Taliban ever were to come into power again in Afghanistan, how does that impact you? And, you basically said, well, it's not going to impact us because you are driving down to the economics of that local farmer, and that local farmer, despite whatever political system is over them, that local farmer is going to fight to make sure that it's not there. And that sounded good. And it was kind of like, oh, that's a good theory. Good luck with that. Let's see what really happens. But Keith, it did. It actually did happen, and you're telling us that didn't happen. So tell us a little bit about the story. When that week was happening, and we're not going to get all political and go into how the U.S. withdraw, but during that week, what were your people on the ground telling you? What were they saying? What were you communicating to them?
Yeah, it was pretty wild, Greg. So I don't know if I mentioned, but when I left the day-to-day in Afghanistan, I was working for Google. So I remember sitting in a meeting and getting text from my partner in Afghanistan, which we've had a long relationship. So we're still, it still feels very comfortable reaching out. And I've been asking, this whole thing was going down, over a relatively short period of time. So I've been checking in with them, seeing that things are okay. I remember hearing him telling me, the Taliban are at the gates of Herat City. And it was like a week where they were at the gates, and there was this standoff, fight at the gates of Herat. And I remember him texting me, Keith, it's over. They're coming. They're over. They're just running through the street. And he couldn't believe it. They're just running through the streets. And that was just so shocking to me that happened. I couldn't believe how quickly like things unfolded. And it was just a few days later, they were marching into Kabul. And not to get into the military or political aspects of that, but it all happened quickly, suffice to say. And we were still trying to run a business, but it was actually fairly quickly after things settled out. And maybe in retrospect, the speed at which things kind of fell apart was better than a prolonged like conflict. It wasn't but a few months after the Taliban started taking over that the saffron union there, and this is a great example how you provide the right incentives, the private sector, and this is how like capitalism can help. The saffron union there got together and then started talking to the people who were now in charge of the province and explained to them the situation. Like, we got the saffron harvest coming up. This is how we operate. When we started this business, also, we didn't go there flying an American flag and trying to impart our cultures and values on another country. We existed within their cultural norms, allowed them to run their business as they saw fit. So, in terms of complying with all the cultural norms in Afghanistan, our businesses there that we work with, like they did, they weren't doing anything, out of the ordinary. So, the union advocated for the industry, with the new people, and it's in no one's. And this is why I said, years ago that nothing would happen, because it's in no one's best interest for the agricultural industry and saffron industry in particular, in that particular area, to do poorly. So everybody wants it to succeed. So I mean, we've just seen that because of that, has gone without disruption. And I don't want to say, as someone who's been on the business end of Taliban weapons, right? Like, I have no sort of good feelings about the Taliban, and they're doing horrible things to the way they're treating women in the country, and we're all hopeful that changes. We're trying to, advocate for that change through our example and the way that we hire women in our processing centers. With all that said, the government's running more efficiently than I had anticipated, and we deal with the government in terms of getting documents and customs, and not directly, but I'm frankly surprised that there's not really a hiccup in sort of the day-to-day functions of government. It runs just like it has always. So it's a functioning government for all intents and purposes.
Wow, that's pretty awesome. And that's good to hear, because that's one of the things that Greg and I have talked about over the past couple of years is I wonder how Keith is doing, with everything, and especially in light of, what was it, in July, right? Of a couple months after our episode came out here. It seemed like that's about when it happened. We're like, oh, I wonder how that's happening. So it's definitely good to hear that there wasn't really any hiccups, with the operations. So are there any lessons that you've learned since our last interview as an entrepreneur? Is there something that you can share with our audience?
So many things, Chris. I feel like I'm getting like a second swing at the plate, and I was just talking to my co-founder, and things just seem a lot easier because you kind of know what you did wrong before, like what you could do better going forward. And I can name a bunch of specific things, but I think one thing in particular is that, as I said, like focusing on a North Star was very important for us, but also cascading down from that North Star, like defining what our objectives are as a business that support that North Star vision. And then, cascading that down to how do we get to those objectives? What are the key results that are going to help us meet those objectives? Because there's a lot of shiny objects out there, and you can only do so much with the resources that you're given. You need to focus on the most impactful things that you could be doing right now, or the things that are going to set the stage for longer term and greater impact that are strategic later on down the line. And that's really helped us focus our effort of our small team on the things that matter. And it's shown up right away in the financials much, much sooner than I thought it would. So we've gone through a very deliberate process of developing our OKRs and our objectives and key results. And that's kind of a lesson that I've learned from Google, but it's really allowed us to focus our energies and develop an operating plan that supports our North Star vision, but also provides the financial results that we need to show our investors and external stakeholders so that we can continue to grow.
So as you're doing that, Keith, what I heard is that you took something that's very altruistic, a very warm and fuzzy North Star, and you were able to, by clear communication and deliberate action, drill that into every part of the business: administrative, marketing, finance, supply chain, everything. And as a result, because of that, because you are laser focused, you know who you are, you know who your customers are, and you're able to communicate that value to the customer, that fuzzy North Star is translating into tangible cash to real financial results, which then you're going to be able to use to further the business down the road. So as you did that, did you have to have difficult conversations with your team? Like, was there, obviously I don't want you to get any specific, but like, did you have to say you might be the right person, but you're in the wrong seat, or you're not the right person to be on this bus anymore. So let's help you find someplace else.
Exactly, Greg. I mean, those conversations had to be had, and you know, we did make 45% reduction in our operational expense, and so that of course implies that that's some people that were supporting us that are no longer there. But and not to say that they didn't do a great job and they weren't the right person at that time, but the direction that we were going, it no longer made sense for that resource or that person to be working in that. And sometimes that was people that were on the team. Sometimes that was contractors that were supporting.
That's got to be one of the hardest things of leadership, though, right?
It's tough. It's really tough, and those are sometimes tough conversations. But oftentimes, like I feel that people are doing the best job in the situation that they're out there trying to doing what they think is right. And I was really happy with everybody's performance. So it's just the direction that we needed to go didn't make sense. So I'm happy to, like, in a lot of cases, see that those folks go on to do other bigger and better things and move into other companies and help them find other opportunities. And so I'm pretty happy to say that that it seems like everybody who has left our team has found another great place and been able to take the experience they had with our small and growing startup and apply them to, in many cases, other companies or bigger companies, which I think is fantastic.
So you hit on this earlier a little bit, but I'd like to kind of dig into it. You were talking about AI and ChatGPT and really leveraging technology. Obviously, as a marketing agency, we have to, my company has to be on the forefront of all of that because it's just how it is. And we've been digging really hard into ChatGPT and Bard and all these other and Bing's tools as well. How do you plan to leverage AI for Rumi Spice?
Yeah, I'm very excited about like where AI is going and these large language models. And I'll tell you with like ChatGPT and Bard, I think that where that's immediately useful for me is that as a CEO, I do a lot of context switching. I'm working on an operations model, like nonlinear programming kind of thing. And then I have to go and write an email, asking for, I don't know, whatever, or I have to write some kind of prose for something or other. So it's hard for me to context switch like that every day. And I really leverage like those large language models to help me just think creatively about things and sort of like set the stage to help me start switching my mind frame to doing something totally different, which it's a small thing, but it's time that you spend like spinning wheels throughout the day to try to move from one task to another, which is kind of inevitable as a CEO. But what's really exciting to me is the operational efficiencies we can drive with AI and machine learning. So, many businesses, big and small, have the problem of like having siloed data or data in different spreadsheets here or there, or systems that don't talk to each other. We do too, but the best time to solve that is when you're small. And it's almost impossible to solve when you're big, and it's huge and costly, implementation to put anything into place once the company's, reaches a lot of different people. So I'm really focused on driving operational efficiency by getting all our different data sources into the data warehouse. And it's stuff that we couldn't really do because it was so time consuming to do manual. And for an example, right, like we have the data to see what our turns are on the shelves, relatively detailed data on how we're turning on the shelves. And then ideally you're taking that forecast that's driving a demand plan, that's driving your operational plan, like, 6 to 12 months down the line. Well, that was just such a long process to do manually that we couldn't really integrate that into our operational plan. And what that caused is that the working capital that we tied up in inventory was enormous. So we have all this working capital just sitting on a shelf somewhere and not being used to fund resourcing or advertising or anything like that. So by some simple sort of consolidation of data and integrating data sources, we're able to look at our forecasts and plan out demand 6 months down the line and make more efficient decisions on our inventory purchases, make efficient decisions on which SKUs are not performing well that we need to like just eat the cost and like SKU rationalize, as they say. And we're able to do that through AI and machine learning. And we're constantly trying to like improve and do more and more of that. So I'm really excited where we're going to be 6 months from now. And I mean, with what we've done in AI so far, that's really helped drive that 45% reduction in OpEx. And it's really going to, you know, if not for what we're going to build with, we work on the Google Cloud service, but if not for what we're going to build, we would have had to add like many more resources and keep scaling our OpEx proportional to our growth. But now we're going to be able to scale our growth without having to scale our OpEx because we're going to automate a lot of the workflows that require people to execute the best.
That is so cool, using current technology that you understand, but leveraging it in ways to support you and your business and have you grow through that. So Keith, thank you so much for joining us today. Before we leave, I've got 2 questions. I want to find out, what is your BHAG now? Has it changed? And then also, after you tell us that, tell us how the Aggie Growth Hacks family can continue to get in touch with you. How can we support you? How can we encourage you? How can we help? But first, your BHAG.
Okay, the BHAG. I've got a good one, Greg, and I think that this is achievable, and it definitely, but it does sound audacious. So within 5 years, we're going to go from 10,000 livelihoods supported in Afghanistan to 100,000, and there's a roadmap for that. And I think where it gets audacious is that I fully expect that in 10 years we can affect and support 1 million lives in Afghanistan, and we're really moving the needle at that point if we can support that many lives through our purchases.
That's fantastic. So how can we come alongside, connect with you, and encourage and support you with that?
Yeah, everybody check us out on Instagram. We put a lot of great content out there, Rumi_Spice. You can go to our website, rumispice.com. And, you know, if anybody wants to reach out to me, you can reach out. You can get me on Instagram or through the website. I'm always happy to talk to Aggies and, you know, happy to have the support of the Aggie Network.
Well, thank you so much, Keith, for coming on and really sharing all of your knowledge with the Aggie entrepreneur community. We all really, really appreciate it and really wish you well as you move forward.
Thanks, Chris. It's a pleasure being on. It's a lot of fun.
Well, how about that, Ags? Was that pretty cool? Or what? As our only interviewee that we've brought back on, as you know, to catch up with him and really find out, you know, how he's doing and how Rumi Spice is doing. I know that I had a lot of takeaways from it. What was your biggest takeaway there, Greg?
Well, he talked about so much, and I really appreciate how open and honest he was with this through his entire entrepreneurial journey. You know, I was really just struck by his tenacity and his leadership of what it really takes to realize, hey, as one of the founders, to be able to step back in, to be able to go through the whole mergers and acquisition process on the other side, and to take some of the emotion out of it and to say, okay, here are the things that I think that we can do in order to bring value, and then to be able to execute on that. I think that one of the things that was most common throughout all of his discussion was the fact that they had to recalibrate what their North Star was. What is their vision of doing good, or, you know, how he kind of encompassed his values, and to be able to see that and then to realize that is trickling down and having a positive effect on the bottom line. I'm obviously a numbers guy. And so knowing that something that you operate your company by, and then it impacts the bottom line and helps him to be more profitable so that he can be more sustainable, so that he can do what his BHAG is and impact not 100,000 Afghanis, but 1 million Afghanis. And that is going to be so cool to see him accomplish that. What about you, Chris?
So mine was very, very similar to that, you know, in regards to the North Star. But I think really drilling down into his marketing, right, and figuring out what's working and not working was really crucial to, you know, figuring out, hey, e-commerce isn't really how we're generating our revenue, right? But yet that's what our biggest spend is on. So why don't we cut back on that and double down on retail, right? And I think that honestly, even coming from a marketer, you know, we on a constant basis are constantly looking at each channel, what's working, what's not working, right? Kind of a thing. But taking it from a bird's eye standpoint of saying, well, e-commerce isn't really driving that much business, but yet we're spending, the vast majority of our expenses on that. Let's cut back on that. That's not working. So I kind of like that. And I liked how he was talking about how, they incorporated more of their North Star, their why they were doing everything, right? And that's very reminiscent to me of Start With Why by Simon Sinek, right? Mm-hmm. Where he talks about, the best companies in the world really start with why and work outwards to what and then how, right? How they do things. So I think he's performed awesome as far as that goes on that. And that's really struck me as my biggest takeaway.
Mm-hmm. And I love how he was able to translate that North Star. And I think he was saying beforehand, they shifted, and as a result, their retail, they're almost doubling the amount of stores that they were in for Whole Foods.
Yeah.
And so that was pretty cool. And then also I appreciate your conversation or your thoughts around the Chat GPT and how that also played into his marketing roles and his finance role projections as well.
Yeah. And it seems like the finance role is really going to have more of an effect with anything. And that's something that, entrepreneurs sitting out there, and we're talking right now, we're recording this in May. This is going to drop in July. Chat GPT is changing on a daily basis. So, I mean, literally, from one day to the next, you're like, whoa, they're now doing this and kind of a thing. So AI in general has really come on strong in the past 6 months, and leveraging it as a technology has been something that I have been focused on for the past 6 months, on how we can get efficiency, down with our staff as well as everything that we do, and not leveraging it completely, but at the same time figuring out, okay, well, how else can we use this, technologies? It's really a fascinating time,
and if you are open to learning about it and open to applying it, then, I mean, Keith said, look, we're going to be able to scale a lot more with the same operational spend than before. So that's real meaningful.
Yes.
I mean, not just dollars and cents, that's actually you achieving your goals faster.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, in the early 90s, right, we were being told about this technology that Walmart had, right? That Walmart knew what their stock was, and they knew exactly when to order and stuff like that. What he was talking about is exactly that, except for a small business versus having, huge chain of retail stores.
Yeah. Having to invest billions of dollars in your supply chain management.
I mean, fully expect it's probably going to 10x his company just by using that technology to figure that out. Right. So that's pretty 100%. Cool. Yeah.
Well, Ags, that's going to do it for this episode of Aggie Growth Hacks. We hope that you enjoyed it. If you're not connected with Keith and Rumi Spice, make sure you go to Instagram. That's where he said that they live the most. But also know that Keith is very, very active on LinkedIn. So if you are an entrepreneur or you want to get into the Spice game, you want to just talk business, make sure that you connect with Keith there. While you're there, make sure that you connect with Chris, you connect with me. Connect with Aggie Growth Hacks. And if you haven't done so, make sure you hit subscribe on this podcast, on whatever podcast platform you're listening to. Give us a big Aggie thumbs up and make sure you share and comment so that we can get this podcast out to more Ags.
Absolutely. And be sure to go to our Facebook group as well as aggiegrowthhacks.com, where you can listen to previous episodes and check out some of our other content. Well, that's going to do it, Ags, for our 99th episode. Join us next time on our 100th episode when we connect with another great Aggie entrepreneur and learn how to hack their growth. Until then, I'm Chris Hunter.
And I'm Greg Martin. Thanks and gig 'em.